So, gratitude, an often misunderstood concept depending on your perspective in life. We could find one definition from loved ones like family and friends, or we could find a completely different definition from yoga instructors in Santa Cruz, California. But how would we apply it to the car world? And there, perhaps you and I could explore the concept of gratitude being a world that is increasingly moving to EV, yet there still exists the combination of A, not a baby buggy, B, almost 500 horsepower, and C, 3 pedals. Let's kick off today's experiment with something that I am personally grateful for, and that would be a 3.6 twin turbocharged V6 that is good for 472 horsepower and 445 pound-feet of torque. Now, as we've covered in many different episodes, you can't just drop that kind of power in the same car and call it a day. So there are a couple of changes. Let's start with the transmission. There are two on offer: a 10-speed automatic, which we will not be driving today, and a 6-speed manual. That 6-speed manual is fitted with a twin disc clutch. Then moving to the rear of the vehicle, there is an electronic limited slip differential. But this is a bit different in that there's a toggle switch on the steering wheel that allows the driver to change for the different application. So there's a wet setting and a dry setting. Now, bringing all this together are some structural changes. The most noticeable, the strut braces that go from the shock tower to the front of the engine compartment. Then, this being a street car, perhaps we talk about fuel economy, 15, 23, 18 combined. Then there are the performance figures. 0 to 60 in the automatic is 3.9, in the manual 4.1, then VMAX, 189 miles an hour. If you remember way back to our old ATS episodes, these things, they're kind of Swiss cheesed underneath, which means they're not exactly the heaviest things we've ever driven. 3,860 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 1,751 kilograms. If this were an automatic, it would be 40 pounds heavier. With that, track mode. God, there is virtually instantaneous power in this thing. I would argue somewhere around 2,000 RPM is really where this thing comes alive, but it's the transmission that we need to focus on. This is not just a manual transmission, this is a good manual transmission. Why do I say that? It has really good weight to it. The throws, if I'm being pedantic, they might be a little bit long, but the weight in the throws, unusually good. And notice the height of the shifter knob itself. It's almost perfect as to what this car should be, and you get such feedback from this unusual transmission choice in the year 2022. God, this thing is magnificent. Why? Because General Motors, when they want to put their mind to something, they can do incredible work, and this is engineering excellence bar none. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, this thing was Swiss cheesed. It is. The platform itself, some of the components that goes into the subframe and how things are connected to the car, that is all exotic materials, and you wouldn't expect it in a vehicle like this. Like, for example, the front suspension, it rids itself of bushings. It has ball joints. In a smaller Cadillac sedan, that is unheard of. We get that now in like Porsche 911 GT3s. Now, everything else that goes along with that, well, not exactly exotic. Up front, it's struts. In the rear, it's a multi-link unit. But both front and rear, it's got stabilizer bars. Now, this car that we're driving, this is a CT4V Blackwing, so it is fitted with a magnetic ride control, and we've driven this in Corvettes, we've driven this in CTS-Vs. General Motors, once again, if they put their mind to something, they can make magnificence in engineering and magnetic ride control. It's probably one of the best systems out there, and here it transforms the driving experience. Like, in transporting this from the hangar up to the shoot road, it's not all over the road, it's a Cadillac. It feels like a basic Cadillac, not even a sports sedan, especially in the steering. There's no weight, and the steering's kind of all over the place. But when you put this thing into track mode and push it, God, it is a totally different animal, especially in the steering. The weight, the feedback, and just how direct it is. I would argue, I'd go so far as to saying the steering in this in track mode is better than in the competition M3, and I'm not overstating that. Then there's the overall pitch, squat, dive, and roll, and here with the magnetic ride control. I mean, just look at this car. You don't see my head bobbing around on a swivel as I'm pushing this thing aggressively. It still has good ride quality because of the way magnetic ride control works, as opposed to a regular adjustable damper setup. Now, a huge hint vice there. Some of this very good ride quality here is a function of the wheel size choice. They could have went with 19s, 20s to make the thing look murdered out, but they went with 18s, and you are absolutely paid dividends with a little bit more sidewall. My guess, this would be a fantastic track car because of that wheel and tire choice. Okay, now that's all fine and good, but how does it work with the brakes? And there it's 15-inch diameter rotors in the front, 13.4 in the back. You would think that's kind of small for a vehicle that has that kind of power, because if you think about an M3 competition, the rotors are a bit bigger there. And then all of the engineering that went into the original ATS that made this thing so magnificent, God, this is so fun, that made this thing magnificent from the start. That's why it's more than just a transmission choice. Driving dynamics, it is quite a thing. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game on the options game with today's contestant, something that could be considered the last fun Cadillac that will ever be produced, otherwise known as the 2022 Cadillac CT4-V Blackwing, for a base price of $58,995. To that, we add the color. Infrared tin coat. It is a burgundy metallic. It's not really a metallic, it's more of a burgundy with flop in it, and I would say it is absolutely well worth the $1,225. Then there is the interior. Now, we will talk more about this later in the episode, but this is not just the color of the interior. This is real leather, as well as some microfiber, and then a two-tone color choice. That also well worth, built in, $4,900. Then we move on to the performance data recorder, $1,600. Isn't a GoPro like 400 bucks? Then we press on to the technology package. This is the ionizer as well as the head-up display, well worth it, $725. Then we go to the satin graphite finish on the 18-inch wheels. So this isn't the size of the wheel, this is the finish of the wheel, which works very well with the infrared tin coat. So I'd say it's worth the $600. Then the climate package. This is the vented seats, the massage seats, as well as the lumbar seats, also $600. Then we continue the red theme going on throughout this vehicle in the form of the brake calipers to have those finished in, you guessed it, red, $595. Then the only other thing you and I would add would be the destination handling from the exotic port of call, Lansing, Michigan, which is also the home of the Michigan State Spartans, which brings us to a total retail price of $70,235. Now, I do feel it prudent to point out that's less than the base price of an M3. Admittedly, I may sound over the moon about this thing, but we do need to tend to the elephant in the room, and that would be the room itself, specifically the interior. If you saw our CT4 episode there, the only way to describe the interior of that thing was abysmal. Hard, dark plastic, just not a pleasant place to be, even though the car was pretty good to drive, and the engine was pretty good too. They seem to have been listening. They made some targeted changes, not wholesale changes. Notice it's got like a diamond stitch, and then it's got the piping, and it's two-tone, and then most importantly, the back of the seat, I wouldn't call it real suede, it's probably like a faux suede. Then they have the V logo in the back of the seat. it really transcends the quality of the car. Very neat detail. Then on the front of the seat, in the bolster itself, there's the Blackwing logo, which is kind of just Blackwing written, and it's here. That's kind of a theme we've seen from other cars, like Volvo first started that by putting the Swedish flag here, and you're seeing more and more car manufacturers do that. Then there's some of the color and trim itself. Like notice, this is a black and tan two-tone interior. That goes a long way to lightening up an otherwise very dark interior. And if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, the seatbelts, notice they are tan to match the two-tone interior. That is only on offer with this two-tone interior. And from what I understand, if one wants to mix and match like red seatbelts with this, they can. It's only the tan and that's it. Or you do the red and like an all-black interior. Can we change that, do something a bit different? And then something really interesting in terms of the detailing. This is a manual transmission car, so it doesn't have paddle shifts. So they cover the opening for the paddle shifts with a spacer, but what's on the spacer? There they do something incredibly fun. They have a schematic of the Milford Proving Grounds where this car was engineered and tested to be able to do what we're doing today. Then they cover the dash and the tops of the doors with better quality material. I'm not going to say it's leather, but it's like a faux leather and has some contrast stitch, which does help the overall appearance. You still feel the crappy, hard plastic at the bottom points of the interior, like the doors and underneath the console. And they try to dress this up by having the carbon fiber. Yeah, that's nice. Overall, it's not a huge difference. It's very small items, but it's the detailing that now makes it a place you'd want to spend some time to really enjoy what this car is supposed to be. So the thing about gratitude is no matter who you ask, there's really no right or wrong or good or bad. There's just different. And that's exactly what this is. But this is different in the most magnificent way, which brings us to the wish list. And there, I've got kind of an odd one. It's not really about this vehicle or changing this vehicle. It's about GM's overall approach to their future. They were one of the first companies to say, hey, we're going to go all EV by 2035. Why did they do that? Because they realized the US government probably would pay the freight on the research and development to go all EV. But I would argue, why don't you go down the path that Mercedes is taking? Instead of saying we're just going to go change and that's it, how about let the market decide? See if there is a demand for all electric by 2025, 2030, 2035. And perhaps you could test that theory with more vehicles like this, because something tells me there's plenty broken car guys and gals like you and I that would keep vehicles like this in existence for many years to come. But this is one man's opinion, and this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV all in word, MotoManTV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I do want to leave you with one last detail about this rather special experience of gratitude. You know the details we talked about in the interior? That extends to the key fob itself. It is color keyed to the car. Until I see you in the next episode, Bish Bacon.